I'm a huge mystery girly, and while I've dipped in and out of thrillers on occasion, I do find they don't click for me quite as well. However, the mystery and thriller category in the Goodreads Awards choice really made me think this year. There was also that slight controversy over having 3 books by Frieda McFadden in that one category, and that really caught my interest. She pops up on my feed a lot, but I've never actually read anything by her, and I thought I should change that. Now, she is a prolific author. This woman can write and she can put them out. So I went through my library catalogue, through pages and pages of books. I requested anything I could get my hands on. Because I have absolutely no patience, as soon as I had what felt like a reasonable number of books, I went down and picked them up. My goal in this video is going to be to try a couple of Frieda McFadden books. I'll get a feel for her specifically as an author, and if I love her, there's definitely a huge backlist I can work through. But also it'll give me a sense of what's really popular, what's really current, what's happening in the thriller genre at the moment. I don't know if it's realistic that I would get through 5 books in one vlog, so my plan now is to take these books away and to read the first page, the first chapter, and really narrow it down to get rid of any that I just am interested in the topic of. And then the ones that I have left, I'm going to try and put into some kind of order. I'm not entirely certain yet whether I'm going to prioritise them by oldest to newest, lowest to highest Goodreads rating, or just maybe my own personal level of interest. But let me know in the comments how you would go about it. I'll check back with you once I've made my decision. I read the first couple of pages in each and I had a little bit of a look at them on Goodreads to see what the summary said, to see which ones interested me the most. Now, I think it's reasonable to narrow this down to 3 out of 5. So the 2 that I'm going to be knocking down the priority list are actually the 2 most recent books. This is The Tenant and The Crash. These were the 2 that had the least interest to me in terms of the actual story, and then when I looked them up on Goodreads, they also had the lowest reviews of the books. So it feels like these are the most sensible choice for deprioritising. That leaves me with 3 books. The ratings on them are roughly around the same and the release dates are roughly around the same as well. So I'm just going to go with them in order that I am most interested in. And to give you them in reverse order, we have One by One. This is about Claire, who is off on a trip to get away from her failing marriage. When the minivan breaks down in the middle of the woods, the group are stranded. They find themselves having to walk to the cabin and getting lost. Along the way, they are mysteriously struck down. I really like the isolated setting, and I think the one by one element of the mystery is going to really work for me. The next book is Ward D. This is about Amy, a medical student, having to spend a night in a notorious mental health unit called Ward D. Over the course of the night, patients and staff alike start to go missing. That reminds me of One by One, which is why I thought this one I would read slightly ahead of that, because this one also has the element of the psychiatric hospital or the mental health unit, and I think that would be really interesting. My top priority though is Never Lie. This is about newlyweds Trisha and Ethan. They're moving into the house of their dreams, a remote manor that used to belong to a renowned psychiatrist who vanished without a trace. When a winter storm traps them on the estate, they begin to look more and more into the psychiatrist's old records, and again, mysteries reveal themselves. This one topped my list because it has the same psychiatric elements as Ward D, which intrigued me. I love an abandoned manor house setting, and I think that having Trisha and Ethan work together in this one will appeal to me more than some of the other books where they seem to be about relationships where the main characters hated each other. Let me know if this is the order you would have picked. I'm coming to you about a third of the way through One by One. So at this point, I'm having a good time with this one. It does have quite a strong mystery aspect to it. And so it maybe has actually been the best one to start with because it's the most connected to the type of book I would usually read. We have 6 people who know each other well. They are going off to a cabin in the woods for the weekend. A car has just broken down. Tensions are high. and they've decided to traipse through the woods to find the cabin rather than staying with the vehicle. We do have two POVs, and mostly we're in with Claire, who we'll get back to, but there's also an anonymous POV that just pops up very, very occasionally, I think twice so far. They do the prologue, which gives us this line. Every single one of these 6 people has a secret that they don't want anyone to know. I can tell you my secret right now. At the end of this week, only one of us will make it home alive. So the premise of the book is that these characters are being picked off one by one. And for me personally, the most interesting aspect then is who is doing this. As I said, the main POV character is Claire. She's here with her husband Noah. They have been together since college, but their marriage is in a very, very shaky spot right now, and it has been, it seems, ever since their kids were born. Noah comes across as a right dick who does nothing to help Claire with the kids and is continually just putting her down in front of their friends when they're home alone. I honestly don't blame her at all for wanting to leave him. Claire is having an affair with Jack, Noah's very, very best friend. So there's a lot of tension riding on this affair. Jack is here with his wife Michelle. The third couple are Lindsay, Claire's bestie, and Warner, Lindsay's new boyfriend. He's very, very handsome. Lindsay is absolutely besotted with him, but he does have moments where he seems to be a little controlling. Now, if our killer is going to be one of the 6 characters, Warner is the fairly obvious choice. He's the one character that no one else really knows a lot about. The rest of them all seem to have a lot more history together. I just wonder if maybe he's too obvious a choice. I really don't know Frieda McFadden's writing yet. I don't know whether she's the type of author that builds a mystery towards a reveal at the end, or reveals something fairly early on and then you spend the rest of the book having to watch the characters find out. So I can't tell if me at this point thinking Warner seems like the very obvious suspect is me getting ahead of the game or me playing into whatever traps she's setting. If Warren is the killer, I'm not entirely certain what his motivations would be, but I think the fact that Jack, Claire and Noah all went to college together, I don't know about Lindsay, I can't remember, I think that feels significant. So I wonder if Warner is someone from their shared past, whether the 4 of them or the 3 of them have done something in the past, and this is a I know what you did last summer type of situation. Also, if he's a plastic surgeon, then maybe he's had plastic surgery and maybe he's someone that they knew and they're just not recognizing him. Similarly, Michelle, Jack's wife, is a very, very high-flying divorce lawyer. She's in the middle of a really important case, and maybe Warner is being paid by someone that is either her client or more likely her client's partner to derail the case. Maybe he's someone that she really shafted as a lawyer. If Michelle is his intended victim, it seems a bit strange that he would take out an additional 4 people to get to her. It feels more likely that it's to do with the bigger number, so that college idea, but I could go either way at the moment. I don't see Noah as being the killer. He's been presented as a bit incompetent up to now, but Jack is very much the good guy, and again I wonder if there's maybe something there. But they've all known each other so long at this point, I feel if there were any disputes or rivalries or grievances within the group, they would have already been dealt with, and therefore Warner as the newcomer is the most likely to have something that he's going to put into play now. But we'll see. The POV that we get, that anonymous POV, we are seeing that kind of the kind of creepy opening where they're just like, there are 6 people and 6 is an evil number and they're all gonna die type of thing. But then there's another one where he talks about, and I say we don't know who it is, but they as a child watched their mother try to poison them when their father's home. And the way the father refers to his child, calls them sport, I just feel like the anonymous character is definitely gendered to be male, which means probably one of the 3 guys is our villain, but that could be a red herring. I suppose in theory the anonymous person doesn't say they're gonna kill everyone. It says that only one makes it back alive. Maybe there's not even a killer. Maybe they all die by happenstance and idiocy. And it's more like a final girl situation where the anonymous POV is just saying, I'm the one that made it out. So I have loads and loads of thoughts about this one at the moment. Loads of different tangents and routes that the story could go down. And I'm just waiting to see whether Frieda McFadden picks something the same way I've been thinking, or whether she's gonna do something completely out of left field. I guess we're gonna find out. It's a shame because Lindsay seems like the most blameless of the six. And also, it's a really terrible murder strategy. Like, just assuming someone's gonna eat some poison berries seems like a terrible, terrible killer plan. Unless Lindsay is the killer and she's faking her death. She could maybe be in on it with Noah. Like, maybe they're having an affair as well and we're meant to not notice that because of Claire and Jack. But Warner's the one that confirms she's dead. I don't think you could fake that with a doctor. Michelle's disappearance could be faked. I mean, no one sees her leave and no one sees a body, so all you would need to do is have, gallons of blood on you, which they did bring bags in the car. I suppose someone could have packed fake blood. I can't remember though who brought the most bags. We're now at the 60% mark and I still think the berries seem like a really lousy way to kill someone. Now Warren's gone. I feel bad that Warren's gone because I really did think it was Warren and I slandered him unfairly. That only leaves us with Claire, Jack and Noah though, and honestly, Jack, he's really hammering it in that it has to be Noah, but I just don't see Noah as the killer. I just don't think he's competent enough, or I don't know, I just don't think he has that darkness in him as a character. Like, he's useless, but I don't know, he's a bad husband. Is he I don't know that he's a killer. I just don't buy it, which means that we have to have Jack be the killer. And in terms of his motives, if Jack's the killer, then we could say maybe that Lindsay is entirely an accident, because that did seem like a really stupid way to murder someone. So maybe the berries are completely coincidental. Then the plan always was to murder Michelle because he can't get a divorce. And then Warren, maybe he kills because he's a witness. And then he'll take out Noah because of jealousy, which leaves then him and Claire. Maybe one of them kills the other in self-defense. Okay, we're 20 pages later and already I'm rethinking it. So actually now I am leaning towards Noah. Or at least it feels like the book's leaning towards Noah. I still don't know that I'll buy that. But if it is Noah, most of the motives would stay the same. We would still have Lindsay being a complete accident. And then the only reason I can think why Noah might kill Michelle would be if they were having an affair. Either Noah and Michelle are in it together and Michelle has just left. Like, she's just fled the scene back to the car and she's going to meet him later. Or he killed her because she was going to tell Claire about their affair. And it's going to be a ha-ha moment when it turns out Claire's been sleeping around too. And then Warren again would just be a witness. And then the same reason that Jack would kill Noah, Noah would kill Jack. It's over jealousy or rivalry or whatever for Claire's affection. And then instead of Claire and Jack, it leaves us with Claire and Noah, who are actually the couple. So I suppose that has a nice kind of symmetry to it. And again, one kills the other in self-defense. I'm assuming Claire's the one that will make it out alive, just because she's a POE character. I got to the end of One by One, and I have been on such a journey with this book. I really don't usually try and solve mysteries along the way. I'm not a person that annotates or takes notes, but I was actually scribbling down all my thoughts on this as I went along, and I tried to narrow it down to who it could be. And the first one is Warner. He got me. He got me so good because he was my very, very first subject. He was my very, very first suspect, but for reasons that I couldn't entirely put my finger on. I suspected him just because he was the least known of the group rather than anything specific, but I was convinced early doors that it was him. And then when he died, I felt genuinely bad that I had falsely accused him. I really was convinced by his death, which when I think about it was pretty much the same death as Michelle in that we never saw anything in particular, and yet I doubted Michelle, but I never doubted Warner. So that was like a really good twist. And then Lindsay as the killer, I did not see coming. I didn't see it coming at all. I think partly I maybe tricked myself. Like, McFadden has done a really good job here of, she never lied to me, but I believed some things based on things that she wrote that clouded my own judgment, and there's no one to blame for that but me. Obviously, I did kind of wonder if, I did at one point wonder if Lindsay had faked her death, but at the time I was convinced that it was her and Noah, and then I thought that couldn't be the option because it's Warner, who is a doctor, who does the, you know, who does the CPR and everything. And I think at various points I had thought that there might be a killing duo, but it just never occurred to me that that duo might be one of the couples we'd already seen. Because the book's so set up with secrets and intrigue, I just assumed that whichever pairing it was would be a surprise, and therefore none of the pre-existing couples would be the killing couple, if that makes sense. So I thought, well, there's no way that Lindsay can have faked her death because it was Warner that checked that. It never occurred to me that Lindsay and Warner weren't together. The very start of the book gives that line about my secret being that I know that only one of us is getting out if you're alive, or whatever it is. I assumed, because it's right at the start, it felt like a prologue, that was the killer coming back to us after the fact to set up the story, rather than it being a thought that the killer is having before the story starts. And so I took that as gospel, that only one person was going to get out. I didn't really think of it as just being that was Lindsay's plan. I assumed it was written in stone that only one person would survive, and so that probably impacted the way that I went through the suspects, the way I was working through motives. It didn't occur to me that we might get more than one character surviving the night. I never really suspected Lindsay because I never really suspected any of the female characters. I suspected both Lindsay and Michelle at various points, but I always thought they were working with one of the men. And I know that Lindsay was, but I never really suspected the female characters because the anonymous POV, which is the killer, at one point the father keeps referring to the kid as sport. And that's a complete assumption on my part, that I just assumed that sport was a way you would talk to a little boy rather than a little girl. So I thought that sport, the killer, has to be one of the male characters. So even when I thought that maybe Lindsay or Michelle were involved in the killings, I always kind of thought of them as the secondary partner, not the real driving force behind the murders. I think I would probably rate this one for pure enjoyment. It's got to be a 4.5. For how good the book is, it's probably somewhere lower, and I'd maybe average that out at about a 4. The one thing that I wasn't as keen on is the epilogue at the end. McFadden really stuck the ending. It was a really good ending in the final scene we have with Claire. She goes out to the car to go through the luggage. She's going through Noah's stuff and she finds a switchblade and a really strong magnet that we've already heard has been responsible for interfering with the compass. So even though we know that Warner and Lindsay were the killers, there's then the thought in Claire's head that maybe Noah did have a plan when they went out, that maybe he was gonna off Jack out in the woods. And that little flicker of doubt is something that she's concerned about. But then she says that, you know, sometimes it's better just not to know. She talks herself out of it, and I think we should have left it there. Instead, we come back to another scene with Lindsay where she tells us in very pantomime-y, mustachio twirling bad guy vibes about how her lawyer's gonna get her off, but also how she pulled it off in the end, and how her and Warner set up Noah with the blade and the magnet. And she says that Claire will never fully trust him now, and she knows Claire so well that this, no matter how strong their marriage seems right now, this is going to destroy them. And I think it would have been better if we had just left it with Claire and let the reader decide that, whether or not they thought it would eat away at her based on what they've learned about Claire and Noah through the book, rather than having Lindsay come in at the end and really spoon feed us that idea. I think there was enough here that McFadden should have just trusted herself and not bothered with that final epilogue. As I said, I think I would rate a 4, and I think on Goodreads it's somewhere around a 3.8, so that means that I'm probably hitting roughly what Goodreads says I should, if we count for rounding, which is a really good sign, because I think the other books, which I did think I would be more interested in than this one, have slightly higher ratings. So in theory, this is the lowest book of the 3, and honestly, it's been a really good one. I don't know it's one that's going to stick with me. Like, that's why I'm thinking that although I'm saying it's a 4.5 for enjoyment right now, and I was writing notes, I was invested in the characters, I was absolutely hooked. In a week or two's time, if I'm, you know, that recency bias is gone, I've stepped away from it a bit, and I come back purely analytically looking at the book, I think it will have dropped slightly, but I had a fantastic time with it, which, as far as I know and as far as I've read, is exactly what you should be getting from these McFadden books. They are very much popcorn books. You're gonna have a great time with them in the moment, and this has lived up to that completely. This has been a really, really good book. I obviously was going more into the mystery of it than the thriller, which it'll be interesting to see in the next two books, which I don't think have as much of a mystery side. I think they are more psychological thrillers. It'll be interesting to see how I feel compared to those average ratings on those. But this one was absolutely brilliant. I really had a good time with it. Definitely worth the hype. I've just reached around the 30% mark of Ward D. At least I think I have. My maths. I miss my Kindle. I miss being able to see the percentage, but I think from my shaky grasp of maths that I'm roughly about a third of the way through this one. I don't have as much to say about this one as I did about One by One at this point. I don't think I'm enjoying it as much as I was that one at this point, but we have Amy, who is a medical student. She is spending a compulsory night in a locked mental health ward. We see her interact with a couple of the residents, and we find out that her childhood best friend is in this ward as a patient. The book has a dual timeline, and in the past we also see Amy and Jade when they were, I think, kind of older teenagers. They're talking about setting exams. And although they have been absolute besties since they were very young, even in these flashbacks when they're in their teens, we do start to see that they're being pulled apart. There are stressors in both their lives. Amy is very, very concerned about doing well in her exams. She obviously wants to go on to be a doctor, so she's very concerned about getting the grades she needs. There seem to be some hints in Jade's home life that everything is not going brilliantly. Her mother seems to be some way abusive or neglectful, and Jade is struggling with that. Amy is seeing a little girl that tells her to do things like steal, or that she's going to fail everything. At least as far as I'm reading it, these are very definitely hallucinations, but it's Jade that is in the mental health ward, not Amy. And when the two of them talk, Jade definitely seems to imply that Amy should be there in her place. So my thoughts on this are that in the past, Amy has done something and Jade has somehow been blamed for it instead. In the current day, we are seeing lots of different residents in this mental health ward. We have some that seem quite threatening, quite scary and quite strange, and others that seem relatively benign. And I think as the story goes on, it might be interesting to see whether these expectations are played with, whether some of the residents that seem very benign turn out to be the ones that are the real danger, and whether the ones that seem dangerous actually turn into allies along the way. The one thing that I'm really sure is going to pop up, it seems to be very Chekhov's gun, is that this is a locked ward. Amy very much at the beginning is very nervous about being locked in. She's concerned that if she's locked in she'll never get out, which again I think ties into that backstory. But we make a big deal about, to get out of the ward you need to put in a 6-digit code. When you put in the code correctly, it'll make a massive noise that lets everyone know someone is leaving or coming in. And even if you get the code wrong, it's still going to make a noise to let everyone know that you attempted to get out. That code definitely seems to be something that we had to clock onto, whether it's going to be Amy trying to get out and not being able to, or whether it's going to be something else. I definitely feel like the code and getting out of the ward is going to be really important. Although both have been relatively single POV, this one just feels a lot closer than the last one did. It feels much more in Amy's head, much more immersive than One by One, even though that was also a first-person POV. Being more character than plot feels a lot closer. It feels a lot more intense and a lot more urgent. This one I would definitely say is far more a psychological thriller straight up than One by One did have some of those mystery elements in it. I was expecting to enjoy this one more than the last one, and we'll see if that holds true. The main thing that appealed to me in this one was particularly the setting, which does seem really interesting, and the fact that this also was saying it was going to do the same thing that One by One did. So I thought I was getting both elements here. This is also going to have a we are knocked off one at a time style story. At the moment I have seen no hints of this, and while it made sense in a abandoned wood setting, I'm interested to see what happens when the bodies pile up in a locked ward. Ward D has been an interesting reading experience. At about the 60% mark, again, I thought about checking in, but honestly, not that much had happened in terms of advancing the plot. We were starting to get those disappearing characters, but for some reason in this one, in Ward D, it feels less threatening and less dangerous than it did in One by One. And I'm not sure if that's because McFadden is also trying to do a slightly unreliable narrator in Amy. And so while we are told that these characters have disappeared, Amy also doesn't think they've disappeared, or she's barely noticed, or she believes the reason for it. Whether the reader does is obviously up for interpretation, but it does make that feel less like people are being knocked off one at a time than we had in One by One in the woods. So that felt less intense to me. It felt like the stakes weren't as high. And I did begin to wonder whether there was a twist at all in this book, whether there was any big revelation to happen, or if we were just going to be gradually watching Amy herself unravel. Funnily enough, about that 60% mark, I had the brief flirtation with the idea that Amy isn't a medical student, that Amy is in fact a patient herself. Exactly almost as I had that thought, like the next page, Amy herself has that notion. She looks down and sees the wristband on her wrist that gives her access to the ward, and has to remind herself that the colour of hers means that she's a student, a doctor, not a patient. And I kind of was like, okay, maybe it's not what I was thinking then, because this has been so clearly said that it's not the case. But I did still wonder, because if Amy is a patient who's deluded herself, then maybe the doctor and the nurse that are on staff are in on this. They're observing her for some reason, letting her live out that delusion to see what's happening. And then I thought maybe that would explain why the happenstance of Jade being there as well, or even that it's Jade that's the medical student observing her friend Amy. I kind of worked through all the different ideas. I took a break, I kind of paused and worked through my thoughts, but ultimately I just couldn't make it match up. It would have explained a few things, like why the code doesn't work for Amy when she tries it, and it fitted in with the notion that we have heard Amy talk about her family, we've heard her mention her roommate, but we've never actually seen any of these people in the book. But it brings up more problems than it solves, because I couldn't make it tie in with how we had Amy talking to Dr. Sleepy's patients at the start. I couldn't quite make all the parts tie together in a way that made sense. And obviously that's not how the story resolves. In the end, we find out that the doctor on call isn't actually the doctor on call. He's already dead, and there is an imposter pretending to be this doctor. He is Jade's boyfriend, and Jade and the doctor, I can't remember the character's name, they have been actually killing off first off the staff and then the patients that recognise them, because the plan is to burn the ward to the ground and escape in the chaos. And I don't know why, but this just didn't feel like it had super high stakes to me, despite the fact you've got a room with 5 or 6, however many it is, bodies stacked up. Even towards the end in the big final conflict, I didn't feel that real sense of danger and urgency the way I would have wanted to. The reveals that we got along the way, once we hit, I don't know, maybe the 80-90% mark, and we started to have things explained, I found that the reveals, if anything, were more about revealing things that hadn't happened, or revealing things that brought the stakes down rather than increasing them. Amy hasn't been seeing the little girl, although we'll get back to that. Amy hadn't committed any kind of atrocity in her past with Jade. Although we see Jade kidnap the maths teacher to get out of the cheating allegations, the reveal is that they didn't hurt him, and you know, Amy actually confessed everything to her parents. There's no secret there, and every reveal just felt like it brought down the level of threat rather than increasing it. It was a strange one. It did have me intrigued, but this is gonna sound strange, but for the I want to say maybe 25% of the book, I was really intellectually invested. Like, I really wanted to know the solution. But in terms of the reading experience, the kind of the emotional reading experience, the enjoyment of the reading experience, I wasn't that invested at all. So quite honestly, if it wasn't for a vlog, or if I wasn't trying this little experiment, I would have been interested enough that I would have probably skipped to the back of the book to get the answer, but not interested enough to actually read the last 50-70 pages that I needed to do to get there, if that makes sense. It wasn't bad, it didn't hold my attention the way I wanted it to. And then we have an epilogue, which we've been led to believe for most of the book that Amy has saw this little girl that tells her to do bad things. She's having these hallucinations. In the big conflict reveal, Jade reveals that she was in fact dosing Amy with hallucinogens through their friendship because she found it funny to have Amy have these hallucinations. There's no mental health underlying condition there. It's a weight off her. But then in the epilogue, we have Amy reveal that whether or not it was the drugging that started it, she is still seeing this little girl. She still has the little girl tell her to do bad things. And a couple of things that have happened kind of in the setup of the story, her boyfriend missing out on his scholarship, it turns out that Amy in fact was responsible for these things because the little girl told her to. And I don't know, that felt really cheap to me, both in the sense of the story and the mystery. It just felt a little bit lazy. In terms of that mental health representation as well, I also had issues with the way that tied into motive. I couldn't really give a motive to Jade and the boyfriend other than they're crazy. And I think Frieda McFadden at one point does actually, in the epilogue, in that last line, uses something similar. But I don't have to listen to absolutely everything she tells me to do. I mean, I would never kill anyone just because the little girl told me to, even though it feels more and more like that's what she's been telling me to do. But I wouldn't do that. After all, I would have to be insane to do something like that. And I just felt again that this was quite cheap. It was a really easy way of giving characters motives that you didn't have to really put in the work to just write it off as they're crazy and leave it at that. And that's the kind of motivation I might expect from a book that came out in the early 2000s, even maybe up to the 2010s, but this is a 2023 release, and I feel like we've moved past that in terms of assigning motives to characters purely on the basis of because they're crazy. So I didn't love it, but I also don't feel like I'm fully qualified to make that judgment. Whether the mental health representation is a problem is one thing, but I also just thought it was lazy writing, and that I can comment on. To be honest, that epilogue as a whole, that might become something of a theme in McFadden's books. Two that I've read, the books would have been stronger without the epilogue. And I know that she needed the epilogue to do the actually I was having the hallucinations moment, but that felt rubbish anyway, and I don't think it added anything to the story we already had at the end of the last chapter. So again, I feel the story would have had a better ending if you just didn't have that epilogue. And I don't know whether that's McFadden or whether it's her editors feeling the need to wrap up every little element with a bow, feeling the need to absolutely make sure that the audience has got exactly what they were supposed to get from it, rather than trusting in both McFadden's writing and your reader's own intelligence to make those connections, to sit with a slightly ambiguous ending and let it percolate, and having it be they can interpret it one of two ways. I don't know, but I really do feel like when she gets towards the end of the book and goes, oh, I've just got the epilogue left to write, someone needs to come and take her keyboard away and just be like, you're done. You're done. It's fine. I do still have the last book, Never Lie, to read though, so we will see how that one plays out in terms of the epilogue. That one is also about a psychiatrist, so again, we'll maybe see how the mental health rep, lazy writing debacle continues. We'll see. So I thought I would check in at the third of the way through this book too, just for consistency with the others. This is the one that I was the most excited about. It's the one of the three that I thought I would find the most interesting. Though none of these books are related, this does feel like a spiritual successor to Ward D. We are going back to talk about psychiatrists and psychiatry and patients, and we also have another dual timeline. So there are a lot of similarities here, with not really kind of intentional, but it's interesting. In this one, what I would call the main timeline, we're following Trisha and her very newlywed husband Ethan. They are looking at a house, it's isolated, it's the middle of a really rough storm, and kind of no surprise when they get to the house, the realtor hasn't shown up, and the weather turns and they decide they're going to have to stay the night. As they poke around the house, they come to realise that it previously belonged to a psychiatrist who went missing and was presumed murdered a few years before. In the flashbacks, we then meet this psychiatrist, Adrian, and we see that she has a lot going on in her life. She has a best-selling book that's just come out, and the proofs for her upcoming book have just been delivered to the house. We also get to see her deal with a couple of her patients. One is really interesting because she's the sole survivor of one of these cabin in the wood type of attacks. She's very much a final girl, and I do wonder if maybe that's a reference or a clue to what's coming in this story, or whether it's just something that ties in maybe with one of Frieda McFadden's other books. I don't know. But the client that's the most interesting is EJ. EJ is an adult, but his parents have been paying for his psychiatry sessions and they've just decided to cut him off. So Adrian has to tell him that he won't be getting sessions with her anymore, and he reacts kind of the way you would think. He's very entitled, he feels like she's betraying him, he feels like she should keep seeing him because they have a connection. It feels very awkward and like overly attached. He definitely feels like he's a threat. Back in the current day, Trisha is exploring the house and she finds a secret room, and I love secret rooms in these kind of old manor style houses. She pulls one of the Stephen King books in the library, it opens up and we get a room full of cassette tapes that are recordings of Adrian's sessions. I love the idea of this hidden room. I want one desperately. Not full of cassette tapes because that would be creepy and weird, but you could have a hidden library inside your library or something. Trisha decides to listen to, of course, one of EJ's sessions, and I don't know if this is supposed to have been subtle, because again, like I said, I don't know enough about Frieda McFadden's books to really know whether does she do a bluff or a double bluff, or are the mystery parts not really the point? Is it meant to be more in the you know what's coming and it's just the build up of tension over that? I don't know. For me at the moment, I'm feeling pretty smug because I feel like I figured out the twist, but I don't really know if maybe she's playing with me. But a third in, and it's, to me, at the moment, fairly clear that EJ and Ethan are the same person. That Adrian's kind of creepy, kind of a stalkerish, kind of obsessed patient is Trisha's now husband. He knows his way about the house. There's references to a specific bottle of wine that both of them make. Ethan's parents weren't at the wedding. He has no family connections. There's just a lot of little hints that these are the same guys. Now, how that's going to play out, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. I'm hoping there's going to be some kind of twist, because I don't want that to be the twist, because it feels really simple and really easy. At the moment, a third of the way in, trying to compare it to where I was a third of the way through the other two books, I would say I am enjoying this one more than I was enjoying Word D, but not enjoying it as much as I was enjoying One by One. Is that gonna change? Who knows? So back to Never Lie, and we're continuing again pretty much in the same vein. We have Ethan and Trish, who are still finding unusual things in the house. Adrian being blackmailed by her patient EJ because he has a video of her slashing someone's tyres in a parking lot, and she now enlists her new boyfriend Luke to break into EJ's house and steal the footage or delete the footage. And I don't know, I had issues with this plotline with Adrian because the logic of it doesn't really hold up for me. I can understand that she's meant to be emotional and that this maybe it makes sense to her as a character, so that's fine, I can go along with it. Luke is a sweetheart. Luke is the only character in this book that is blameless, and Luke agrees because she's so concerned, she's so worried, he doesn't want her life being ruined. He breaks into EJ's house, he deletes the footage, and Adrian's very like, but you can't watch the footage, make sure you don't watch the footage, because she doesn't want him to see it. That just reads strangely to me, because it's like she doesn't trust him, or she either doesn't trust him and or doesn't want his opinion of her to be affected by this. So the video is her slashing the tires in the parking lot when someone cuts her off for a space, which I get is a bad thing, fine, but she doesn't want him to see that, she doesn't trust him to know that, but she's absolutely fine with him knowing that she is drugging EJ so that he is like unconscious, so they can break in and take, you know, the video. To me that seems like that's the worst crime, or the worst moral failing, or whatever you want to call it. I don't understand why she's okay with Luke knowing that she has drugged one of her patients, but she doesn't want him to know about her slashing the tire. I get that slashing the tires are a bad thing, but who amongst us hasn't at least thought of that? So I don't know, it seems like a strange character thing that she's so worried about this coming out. And I know she doesn't want the drugging and the hacking to come out either, but just in terms of how Luke sees her, it seems like a strange clash. And then obviously that goes wrong. Instead of the footage of her slashing the tires, he ends up with footage of Luke breaking into his house. And so he goes back to Adrian and says, well, instead of now blackmailing you for whatever drugs it was he wanted, he's now like, I want you to sleep with me. And she then, you know, she's horrified, and again ends up having to tell Luke this and suggests that, you know, maybe we just have to get rid of him. He does try to talk her out. He's the only voice of reason in this book, that he does say, you know, would it be the worst thing if this came out? And she's like, yes, it absolutely would be the worst thing. And I kind of just feel like she's already got this big successful book. She has another book deal. Controversy sells. And even if it didn't, it's not massively newsworthy that, like, she had a moment of complete irrationality and she slashed someone's tires is so low in terms of what would affect someone's life. I get that she's a psychiatrist and that requires a certain level of, I guess, like, respectability, but she's also now getting into this best-selling author category, and I don't think it would hurt that career as much. If anything, it might help. There are definitely some authors I've heard of that have done amazingly sketchy things, and if anything, it seems to increase their book sales because people are curious. So I can see her being worried about her professional reputation, but it just seems like such a jump to go from, I really want to hide that I slashed someone's tires, right through to, like, murder is an acceptable solution to this, and I'm not concerned that that might be a problem. I don't know, maybe we needed more steps along the way and I would have bought into it, but it just didn't work for me. It just didn't work for me as a motive, but it didn't affect my enjoyment of the book. Which, I actually was really impressed with the twist in this one. I was so confident I had it. I didn't know what the plot twist of that would be, how it would matter, but I was so confident that the point of this is that EJ is Ethan and Trish has married this man. But McFadden actually pulls off, I don't even know if I'm going to break it down for you. You know the shuffle game where you have the coin or the penny or whatever under little cups, and then you shuffle the cups around and then you lift one and it's not where you think it'll be? That was like this, but with character names. And none of it was a cheat, and maybe it's not that clever because obviously you get to give your characters their names, but I was really impressed that we get that EJ isn't Ethan, he's someone called Edward, and Trisha is actually Patricia, so she's the P character that was being interviewed at the beginning about how she survived the girl in the cabin type situation. And then because Adrian needs to get rid of EJ, she gets Patricia in and is like, I know what you did because you were the killer there, so you're gonna kill him for me. And then that's the body we find, and then Ethan is still connected to Adrian, but he's not one of her clients. His mother was one of her clients, and his mother was seeing Adrian because she was paranoid about her son being out to get her, but actually clearly her son was out to get her. And actually Trisha and Ethan are an adorable little murder couple together now. The whole thing, like, it was so shuffly, but really, really fun. Wild. And the level of coincidence that these people all knew Adrian Israels, but that worked for me. I think that's what I kind of want in thrillers. It needs to make sense, but I don't need it to be realistic, is maybe the distinction. And this had that in spades. Now, to come back to the epilogue issue I mentioned at the end of Ward D. Yes, because there is one. She loves an epilogue. There is an epilogue in this one. It's set 2 years later, and in Trisha's POV. It's not bad. It doesn't offend my sensibilities the way One by One did. It doesn't do anything, I think, cheap the way Ward D did, but I don't think we need it. I don't think it adds anything to the story. 2 years later, Trisha and Ethan have their baby that Trisha was pregnant with. They have a little girl. They're living in Adrian's old house, and she kind of reveals that they had to kill Luke to keep the secret. He's buried in the back garden, but it's fine. Everything's grown back. The only thing you get from that epilogue is Trisha delivering the line where the secret's been covered up just fine. There's nothing to worry about. But if they ever did have to keep a secret, then basically she would be willing to kill Ethan to keep the secret, because only one person can keep a secret. And it felt unnecessary. I didn't get anything from that epilogue. It wasn't particularly revealing. The only real purpose of the epilogue seemed to be to deliver that kind of like nod to camera, wink wink, I might kill him too moment, and also just to go, yeah, 2 years later they had got away with it. And it's like, yeah, I assume that, because I feel like if they didn't, it would have been important to the story, and that would have been part of the story, or that would have been the epilogue. If you just didn't have the epilogue, I would assume they got away with it fine. While I definitely enjoyed this one more than the last book, and overall I have enjoyed McFadden's books in this vlog, my takeaway is that someone needs to stop her from writing epilogues, because they're at best not necessary, and at worst actively cheapen the book. So overall though, like I say, I did enjoy them. The librarian, when I picked them up, described them as popcorn books, and that's absolutely what they are. They're very easy to read. She has a real skill with writing books that the pace keeps you going. The chapters all tend to end on intrigue or cliffhangers. She has a really readable writing style. It doesn't focus too much on description. There's lots of action. There's lots of dialogue. She writes really compelling books. Some of the plotting I don't know holds up to massive amounts of scrutiny, and overall from the 3 books as a kind of group, I do have some concerns about the way she uses mental health as a plot device in terms of writing ability, and I would be interested in people that have more experience with mental health representation and how they feel she handles that. But they were enjoyable. I'm not gonna rush out to buy her next book. I don't ever see her being an auto-buy author for me, but I think in future, as the new books come out, I would read the summaries, and the ones where specifically the summary interests me, I would maybe pick up those books. So definitely an author I've added to my maybes pile. I'm gonna keep an eye on what she's putting out, but not one that I'm absolutely going to be there on release day pre-ordering. Funnily enough, looking back, I actually think from what I got out of the 3 that I picked, I wonder if I would have enjoyed The Crash maybe more than Ward D. Maybe I would get those back out the library at some point if it fitted some other reading challenge, or I took a notion for some light reading, maybe for traveling. I think these books would be really good if you were on the go. They're really easy to pick up in small sections and snippets and kind of jump straight back into the world of. Overall, the plots were good. I liked the twists, the turns. I do think the characterization is a little bit flat on most of her protagonists. The background characters are very much cardboard cutouts, but again, I think that's maybe something that is in kind of part of the genre. We're meant to be really focused on the protagonist, and the world around them is painted in really broad brushstrokes. So the characterization I didn't love, but I also didn't hate it because it felt appropriate. It was more about the story and about getting us through the expectations, pulling the rug out from under us, playing with things, rather than delivering really deep, fleshed out characters, especially in those kind of supporting roles. If you've read Frieda McFadden in general, I can definitely see she has some recurring tropes and recurring themes, and I liked some of them more than others. So I think that in her really broad back catalogue, what I would want to do is find the ones that most lined up with what I enjoyed in these ones and try and read those. Overall, I had a good time with these books. They went in really quickly. I had an enjoyable reading experience. I think my overall ranking of them would probably be Ward D, Never Lie, and then One by One was my favourite. Without really any doubt, One by One was my favourite, which wasn't what I expected, both from the description and the first couple of pages, the general vibe, or from the Goodreads reviews, that I was expecting the exact opposite order actually, now I think on it, but I had a good time. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know that there were a lot of spoilers in it, so I'm assuming that anyone that's got to this stage has already read these books or has absolutely no interest in them. From the things that I enjoyed about her books in this vlog, which of her other books would you recommend? If you're not able to recommend specifically Frieda McFadden books to me, then I would love to hear your recommendations of your favourite thriller or other authors like McFadden who are really, really well known in their genre that you think I should try next. You just want to show you were here, leave me some kind of cabin emoji, and I really hope that I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.